This is a very special day because we can't remember the last time that the House and Senate Republicans got together, but we're doing so because we believe that this is a very important year and that there are issues that are unaddressed by the majority in both the House and the Senate. And so this year, we are making a joint effort of solidarity and unity in behalf of the people of Hawaii, who we believe are frustrated, annoyed, disappointed, and in some cases angry at the lack of respect they get from this very building here. So as a consequence, both the House and the Senate minority have their own packages and agendas, but we come together this morning on some bills of common interest that we think will benefit the majority of the people. And we urge the media to give more than short shrift this year to these ideas and to look at them critically in light of things that are going on within the community. I think a lot of these measures, even though they have been introduced before or discussed before, have a new urgency based on the not so special session that took place in October and November of last year, when a record number, nearly 10,000 people, came down to this Capitol, and their unified cry was, "Let the people vote, let the people decide." And the legislature basically turned a deaf ear to that. And these folks, many of our colleagues thought, would just go home, stay at home, and not become engaged. But they want to become engaged, and so they want to know what they can do. They learned to their chagrin that they had no initiative, no referendum, no recall, no term limits. And they learned that despite their numbers, despite their persistence, despite their pleas, they were basically ignored. So the House and Senate minority is going to redouble our efforts to try to provide the citizens with the ability to get more empowered to take democracy and participate. We think that this is particularly important because over the last years we've watched Hawaii go from #1 in voter turnout and participation to number 50, last in the nation. And while there have been proposals to have instant recommendations of registration and ease of voting, we believe, particularly after listening to the people, that the reason that they don't vote is because they don't feel that their voice matters. We want to do everything possible to make that voice matter, and we want to engage the public, and particularly those people that came down to the Capitol, their capital, for the very first time, and for the many, many people who say they're not registered to vote because their vote doesn't count. Their vote does count. We want to make sure that they have means and tools to do so. So, the first thing that we're doing that both House and Senate Republicans agree on is a package of bills that will energize direct initiative. Direct initiative sometimes people have problems with because they say it's so messy. And because, doggone it, there's so many of those initiatives, they point to the state of California primarily. If we were to err, we would rather err on the side of the people and have too many things to consider rather than not enough things and to consider them behind closed doors. So we're proposing the idea of direct initiative where the people who can summon enough signatures can get their wishes on the ballot. It doesn't mean that we will agree with everything either, but we agree with the process and allow them this empowerment tool. That's all it is. It's not a panacea, but it is a tool. Secondarily, both the House and Senate Republicans agree wholeheartedly on the idea of referendum, on allowing people to vote on key issues, not just social issues, but fiscal issues, issues that are going to affect them, their family, their business, their livelihood. For too long now, people have assumed that we have all the answers in this building, although our voting records show that we certainly do not. We can use our help, and since we in the Senate have gotten rid of prayer and don't need a divine intervention, then we fall back on the people. And we believe that these measures, particularly initiative and referendum, will spur more interest, more voting, and more participation. So this year is our joint starting point. And now I'd like to turn it over to the House Minority Leader, Representative Johanson.
One of the things that the House and Senate Republicans are excited about is that we've tried to think of ways that are cost-effective, maximizing the effective part of that moniker, ways to really help people and protect them. And I think what you'll see, particularly with respect to the elderly and children, is that you can make sure that those vulnerable populations are cared for without always having government do the actual caring for. So some of the solutions that we jointly propose would be to look at a silver alert system, and this has been proposed before, but it utilizes existing infrastructure with the Miley Amber Alert system. Again, not requiring huge expenditures, but just redirecting some of the existing infrastructure to make sure that those seniors who have impaired mental abilities, either through dementia or any form of mental illness, who may wander and get lost, are actually cared for in a common sense way that we can find them and make sure that they're protected, but that doesn't require huge government expenditures. Additionally, the rights of children. There are some easy common sense solutions on ways that we can better protect them in the judicial system. One of them, and one of the bills that the Senate and the House are jointly proposing, would be to move children's cases up the docket on the judicial calendar, just so that it's not a long, extended trial that for some of our most vulnerable are incredibly difficult to weather, as they would be for adults, but certainly for children it's even more difficult. Along those lines, an additional bill that would allow children the right to video testimony rather than necessarily having to be present with their accuser. Again, something as difficult even for adults, that ability to ensure that they're better protected. Many of these things, as you can see on the elderly and the children front, don't require significant changes, which is part of what makes them so feasible to implement. We're focused on being feasible, we're focused on being effective, and really making sure that people are cared for and that government is doing a good job in ways that don't necessarily require huge, massive new programs that require a ton of new expenditures that, quite frankly, the state just doesn't have the money for. Additionally, there will also be a component focusing on our military and the veterans, and I'd like to actually call up Representative Ward to join me because he is one of our chief veterans among us. One of the things that we'll also be doing as a House and Senate package is to make sure that income taxes, there's an exemption from the income tax for active duty military veterans who are serving overseas or serving outside the state. Many states already allow that, and Hawaii does not, but it's a way to honor them and to make sure that their burden is eased and lifted while they're serving our country.
Thank you for that introduction for the veterans. There's so many veterans. In fact, did you know that 40% of the minority caucus are veterans? You know the national average used to be 10%. The minority caucus is 40%. That's a lot of veterans. Now, what one of these bills does is make it easier for them to be identified, not because we want to give them honor, which generally is the case we want to do, but we want to have it where they can, with their driver's license, and I forget the name of the bill, with their driver's license, have a veteran insignia or inscription or just the knowledge that they are veterans. Not only because it allows facilitation of different programs, but quite frankly, we get discounts. For those of you who go to Home Depot or Lowe's, you can get a 10% discount as a veteran. This is not a plug for them, but it's a plug for veterans to say that this is one of the easiest and best things that we can do with a very easy identification program.
It also makes sure that they don't have to carry around a cumbersome list of documents and folders to prove that they're active duty military veterans. Again, this notion of common sense changes. Sometimes common sense is very absent from this building. And the Senate and the House Republicans want to make sure that we're pursuing things that make sense and things that make a difference. And I'd like to turn it back over to Sam to talk about some of our other bills on taxation.
First of all, Representative Johanson, I may have to recuse myself on the silver alert bill for old people. One of the things that you can see in our joint conference today is that we are bringing the younger people and the not so younger people together on these issues that we feel very strongly about. Now, the House will have additional package amendments. We will too. In fact, we're having a press conference on Friday morning to release all of ours. And I want to tell you again, I want to stress that the whole idea here is because Republicans have listened. We've listened to people in the community, not just from our own districts and constituencies, but from statewide. We go to neighborhood board meetings, we hold town hall meetings, we hold informal gatherings. We are very accessible. And what the people are telling us is they want to be treated differently from the way they are. Nowhere does that manifest itself more than in our income tax structure. We're now the second highest income tax state in the nation. And every year we have a bill before the legislature which is supposed to reconcile the state tax laws with the federal government, with the Internal Revenue Service. The problem is, every year, we don't do that. We pick and choose the things that we want to reconcile with, and we leave out the other things. And usually, the things that we leave out are of benefit to Hawaii families and consumers. For 15 years now, I have complained every year on this bill that we don't change the personal exemption. And let me tell you what the significance of that is. In the year 1984, the personal exemption in Hawaii was $1,040. The personal exemption on your 1040 IRS form was $1,040. Now, 31 years later, the federal exemption is $3,950 and the Hawaii exemption is $1,400. In other words, we have not kept pace with either inflation or with the IRS faction. In other words, a Hawaii resident is treated as 1/3 an individual, according to the national average. That's not right. It costs our local residents money, and it's not fair. We want to make that the same. In any kind of reconciliation bill, we want to make sure that all of the investment and savings and personal exemption amounts are the same in Hawaii as they are nationally. Secondarily, transparency is a very large issue with the House and Senate Republicans. We talk a good story, but we don't make it so. We want to make all of the legislation more transparent. People are concerned about where we earn our money, where we get our contributions. And every year we try to tweak the financial disclosure laws and the campaign spending laws. One of the things that we're suggesting that we do is move up the deadlines to make this information available before the legislative session, not after. In that way, voters and the media will have a better idea of where gifts and money contributions come from before we start hearing bills, listening to lobbyists, listening to special interests, and before we act. It's a very simple thing to move up the financial disclosure to January 15th, and we think that that's something that's long overdue, and we want to do it. So basically, these are the things that we're working in tandem with. We have great people that are helping us, but mainly we're listening to the people. And oftentimes people say, well, what can Republicans do? How can you get your bills passed? We can get them passed if the public stays engaged and they believe that this is our overall objective, to give them more tools and empowerment. If they tell our colleagues they want hearings, if they tell our colleagues they want these bills passed, then in fact we can do that this year, and that's what we're hopeful. Representative Johanson?
I couldn't have said it better myself, and I think with that, the three of us would be happy to take questions. We just wanted to make sure to go into this next session with a joint and united effort, and one that's long overdue. Thank you.
I have two quick questions about initiative from referendum. Rep. Johanson, I already spoke to you about this before. Senator Slom, you've been introducing this year after year after year.
Right.
The first question is, any hint from the majority in either chamber to actually listen? And the second, why no recall as part of this?
As to the first question, any interest from the majority, the answer is no, at least not from leadership, although there are individuals within the majority in both the House and the Senate that do support this. And as you know, we don't give up year after year. What's different this year is that, first of all, We have joint support, and we're doing that. Secondly, we are calling upon the people of Hawaii who found out that in fact they do not have any of these tools to stay engaged. And I'm happy to report that since November, that many of these people that had come here by bus for the first time are back. They have been engaged. There are citizens groups, so we're much more optimistic. I say that after also acknowledging that there are differences of opinion about how effective initiative is and so forth, but that's the whole reason you have a hearing. That's how you bring people forth, and you weigh those arguments and make your decision. As far as recall, you know that I've supported that since I was first elected. Initiative, referendum, recall, and term limits. And we will announce that with our package on Friday. We do have bills in for recall. People, again, in November came down and said, I don't like this particular legislator. What do I have to do to recall him or her? And we said, nothing. You can't do it. And it was similar to what we learned during the Senate investigation of the University of Hawaii and the Board of Regents. There was no direct recall provision for a university board of regents, no matter what they did or didn't do. The public need these as options. They may not be used, but just the fact that you have them will give a lot of legislators pause in doing what they do. And by the way, I want to acknowledge Ms. Tisha Panter, who is the senior attorney and director of research for the Minority Senate. She's done a terrific job in drafting a lot of this legislation. Does that answer your question?
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah. I want to add one footnote. The tipping point for populism hasn't been reached yet, but there's a momentum, there's a trajectory. People want to become involved, and I want to predict today that the Constitutional Convention is going to get a bigger push the next time it comes around. We haven't had one since 1978. It's in the Constitution. Every 10 years we're supposed to consider it. We haven't, and I think with what Sam and what Arron are saying, it's going to have more momentum, more legs. Tipping point hasn't been reached, but we'll see what happens in November 2014.
In terms of your judicial package for children to testify on video and also to move it up in the calendar, is that, did you talk to the judiciary? Because that seems like those could just be rules that they pass, or do you actually have to pass a law? Or could you use a resolution? What is it that you can do?
Well, I think sometimes, as you see in this building, things can be done by law, sometimes they can be done by admin rules, and sometimes they can just be done by fiat. But in order to get the conversation going, that's part of these. But I think there actually are legal changes that are required. But certainly we wanted the conversation to be at the forefront. And sometimes it takes something happening in this building for the administrative wheels to turn to say, we'll go ahead and do this, because that's a common sense thing. We know.
With your civil alert, are you thinking it? Oh, go ahead, sorry.
Well, no, I was just going to follow up on that because it is an important issue. We researched it very well. As you probably are aware, the state Supreme Court had ruled before that children must be present. They cannot be in a separate room. And what that's done, particularly with continuances and additional hearings, it's really hard on the children. We are concerned about the keiki. We have more in our joint packages, but this is an opportunity to at least give them one more option to allow the initial deposition to be used. They still have to be present, but we want to protect the children, and we feel this is one way that we can do it in some respect.
In terms of the civil alert, are you thinking of using how you use the Miley?
Yes.
There's the Miley alert, and you put it on the freeway and things like that. Or what is your plan for that?
It would be to utilize existing infrastructure, so that's precisely the mechanism. That Miley Amber alert.
What kind of things are you thinking about that would be good to put up for referendum? Can you give examples, maybe of past issues that would be good to put up for future issues?
Okay, well, let's see. In 1998, we asked the people to vote on traditional marriage. They did. They thought they had passed a constitutional amendment that defined traditional marriage. They weren't sure exactly about the fine print, but what the state put out in terms of its description said, oh, don't worry, you've done it. Now we fast forward to 2013, and the people said, wait a minute, we already voted. And the majority said, yeah, but we have a difference now. Besides, everybody has evolved and they have a different opinion. And so people said, well, okay, if they have a different opinion, let's vote again. and the majority said, no, there are certain issues we don't think you should vote on. So we can start with an issue like that has broad significance across the state, but also fiscal issues, where we're asking the people to spend more money or to sacrifice more things. This is, of course, on the mainland, it's a usual occurrence when people have to vote on bond issues, they have to vote on taxes for education. We don't let the people vote here. And as was pointed out, the last Constitutional Convention was 1978. And it was kind of like the 1880s when the U.S. Patent Office said we should close down the Patent Office because all the good ideas and inventions have been made. We don't need it anymore. We need a Constitutional Convention now more than ever. So from 1978 to say everything's been done, the people don't feel that way, but they have no opportunity to express themselves. So the referendum is one of those issues.
A prime example that had a broad swath of support would have been the repeal of the PLDT. I mean, you know, that was a mixture of people in this body, good government folks, transparency types, environmentalists, and that had broad support. Now, it was ultimately repealed here, but it also could have been done by the public. And so the great thing about it is it's transcendent from one particular idea, but I think the genius behind it is really empowering people. We're supposed to be, you know, a representative democracy. We're supposed to be representing people. It allows people to make sure that their government is representing them, and if they're not, through referendum to fix it.
I'd like to add that to me, initiative is as key as referendum. And that is what's going on in marijuana, what's going on with GMO, what's going on with a lot of the things that we think we know better, as the senator said, that hey, we know better on all these marriage issues. Letting the people and see what initiative can bring out in terms of this controversial issue. And there's many. Hawaiian sovereignty. What do the Hawaiians, what do the people of Hawaii feel about Hawaiian sovereignty? We don't have really a pulse of the people on that. And as I said, GMO and marijuana are two things that they really need to have a public debate out. And initiative and referendum allows that.
What's the position of the minority on tax increases? You talked about some tax adjustments, but what about voting against all tax increases?
The Senate minority is very clear. We have opposed each and every tax increase and major fee increase. We will continue to do so. Our problem, in our belief, in Hawaii is not a shortage of revenue, it's an excess of spending and debt.
On the House side, House Republicans will continue largely to oppose different tax and fee increases. We also believe that the cost of living in Hawaii is too high, and it's kept high because of tax and fee increases that people either continue to exacerbate or don't alleviate.
One of the red alerts, however, is that fees have become the new euphemism for taxation. We're not going to tax you, we're just going to fee you to death. And right now, a lot of the fees that are coming on board are really proxy taxes. But rose by any other name is still a rose. So we're going to be very alert to what fees that are on their way.
If there are no other questions, we thank you very much for coming. We remind you that we are always accessible and we don't give no comments. We'll give you an answer to your questions. Thank you very much and have a better day. Aloha.